Hello YouTube, this is Morgan, Airspeed Prime here at my next Airspeed's Avatar Rewatch video. This one's going to be for Book 1 Water, Episode 15, Bato of the Water Tribe. This episode is animated by DR Movie, this time outside a secondary animation studio, though I still think it's a pretty okay looking episode. But overall, I think this is, realistically you kind of have to say one of the weaker episodes of the series overall. Not enough to make my bottom five, but I think it's there and thereabouts, and I've definitely seen some people put this quite low as one of, if not maybe their second or worst episode of the series. And I can understand why some people would place it there, because I have a few issues with the episode, but I ultimately think it's kind of important enough of an episode that it's I'll give this one some praise and not bring it down too massively for some of the issues I do have with it. So the issues I would have with this episode would actually primarily be around episode placement, in that I feel this episode and then The Deserter, which follows it, basically have a very similar thing happen in both of them, that being basically the only two episodes in the first season where characters are angry at Aang for a wrong decision that he makes, or an action that doesn't work out so well. So in this case, it's keeping the map to Hakoda from Katara and Sokka. In the next episode, it's him going a bit overboard with the firebending and burning Katara. And I just feel that within the season overall, you shouldn't have those two episodes that basic same thing happens placed right next to each other. In that I feel Bato of the Water Tribe will be much better placed as, I think this is almost like a perfect episode for episode 9. The slot immediately after we get the plot in episode 8, so you gotta rush, get to the Water Tribe and so on. I feel immediately kind of maybe having them meet Bato and present this idea of Aang has all this stuff to do, but then suddenly this issue comes up of, what if Katara and Sokka ever want to go meet their father? Does that mean they have to kind of go away from Aang? And then you present that issue of, what does Aang do if he has to go on his own? I feel that was the kind of perfect way to do it, and maybe, restructure the episode a little bit, maybe have Bato do a little bit of warrior training with Sokka, while maybe Katara and Aang start waterbending training. They still cover an aspect of what the waterbending scroll is about, but you use Bato as a kind of way for it to be a Water Tribe episode, and a reason for why the group kind of stops for a little bit as well, because this isn't an episode I'd necessarily criticize massively for avoiding the overall plot and the time rush crunch on the series. The structure thing I think will be the main thing. I think The Deserter is fine where it is. I do feel it's Bato that's the one that probably should move as an episode, because very little I think ties it inherently to it has to be episode 15. But I do treat it quite importantly, just because we meet Bato. It's we get some important flashbacks with Sokka and his father that really, I suppose, define a lot about what Sokka's arc is and what he's really trying to accomplish here, becoming a better warrior, and showing us once again what he kind of missed out on with his father being away. That a lot of what I talked about in the early episodes about Sokka in episode 1, 2, 3 and 4 especially, with the whole idea of him being a bit sexist because he's the only male of warrior age left in his tribe, and him thinking that he technically is the best warrior in his tribe, but he hasn't had the training to really justify saying that sort of stuff to anyone. So there's that. And I appreciate this episode addressing that, with the idea of Bato is the one to basically put him through the important ritual as a Water Tribe man to go through the ice dodging, and in this case it's not necessarily ice, but he does it in the water here with these kind of rocks, and it's almost a more difficult thing that Sokka has to do here, but he shows himself really well, good leadership, and then I think even more so than what would be maybe expected of him, knowing who is on his team so well and using their abilities to help him get past an obstacle, in that he has confidence that Katara and Aang together can get him over those the kind of blockage of rocks that they had there. And that was a really kind of cool thing to show some of Sokka's more unusual tactics, that he's a non-bender, but he knows that what bending is like capable of, and can use benders effectively on a team, which is important. So just that ice dodging thing, and it kind of being a reference to the first episode as well, because Sokka obviously kind of failed in a little bit of ice dodging, which is sort of in a way why the two of them ended up stuck on that little patch of ice out, where they both have an argument with each other and allowed Katara to get angry and basically free Aang from the ice. So, it's a reference to that he failed then, passes now, and it's this kind of notable moment. But the big thing that happens in the episode is that Bato reveals to both of them that he's been left behind because he's injured, but they're gonna send word of where they'll kind of come around to pick him up, and Sokka and Katara can come to meet their father again for the first time in 2 years if they come with him. Now, of course, the issue of this episode happens because Aang hears this and thinks that Sokka and Katara are going to leave, and happens to leave himself, not wanting to hear any more of this, and he leaves just prior to them starting to actually discuss why they can't go ahead with this, why they can't join up with their father at this point in time, and saying why they have to stick with Aang going forward. So it's one of those things where it's a very frustrating kind of plot point in an episode that they use a lot in like TV shows, especially like ones like this early on, like you see it in a lot of kids' TV shows. You almost expect more from Avatar on the writing department, of just like the plot happens because of a miscommunication, and it's kind of a very forced miscommunication as well, in that the setup for it, I think, is not written particularly well either. That like it's not just that like they completely like it's not like they write well Aang being ignored by everyone. They literally just have him be ignored. He tries to speak, no one's listening to him. They're just off obsessed with Bato, and I get it to a degree. Why they have all the time in the world to talk to Aang. They might not have all the time in the world to talk to Bato here, and I get why they do that. But I think it's a bit hard to, I suppose, understand why they just completely kind of abandon Aang. It's very much like Aang and Katara in Jet, and how they just completely ignore Sokka. It's kind of the same thing, but now Aang being the one who's kind of ignored. And they bring it together at the end with the whole idea of them, the whole idea of the lone wolf. Bato was left behind. Katara and Sokka both understand what it is to be left behind, especially Sokka being left behind by his father. For obviously good reasons. It's a really nice scene, that one. Part of the reason why I don't rate the episode so low, because that flashback is really good. You're not old enough. I want you to stay here and protect your sister. But Sokka, in the end, understanding why they were kind of wrong to let Aang go, and why they have to go back for him. And I think Katara able to understand that just as much, and that she misses her father also. And that's kind of how Aang must feel right now. The only people who kind of care about him really right now have just kind of left him. Which I suppose is another kind of issue with the episode, in that, like, okay, once Aang reveals that he has been lying about holding onto the map, the idea here is that they are literally just going to abandon Aang. Like, you lied to us, so we're just going to leave you here out on your own to do all this stuff, even though we've accompanied you all this way. I get it's a bit of a break of trust, but like, really, you're just going to go off and leave Aang? I get maybe there was potentially a plan to like reunite at some point after they met their father, but it's a bit like kind of hard to believe that they just do it here. And I think that's part of why this episode is a little heavy-handed with its approach to the issue, and why I feel that this should have been a much earlier thing. Like, you could have had the same issue, but if it was episode 9, I wouldn't have as much of an issue. But it's because immediately Aang is like criticized heavily in this episode, and then in the next episode he's criticized just as heavily. And there's no real connection drawn between the fact that Aang has made mistakes in 2 consecutive episodes. So that's why I feel like this episode should have just been placed earlier in the season. But yeah, that's a lot of that stuff. The other plot of the episode is the introduction of June and Nyla, the Shearshoe, the bounty hunters, basically. And how Zuko encounters her as she bounty hunts, and then uses the fact that, her power allows her to basically find anyone if they have a scent. He has Katara's necklace, he uses that to find Katara. And again, it kind of explains why the second half of the episode happens the way it does, in that they have to separate Katara and Sokka from Aang to make it so that Aang has to rush to their aid because Sokka and Katara have been attacked on their own. But it's just as I said, the reasoning behind why they have a full separation of the group is not the best, given how late it is in the series. It would be much more understandable again if this was earlier on in the series, that like, okay, they haven't known each other that long, this break of trust is a bit more meaningful because it's so early rather than it coming later on. But yeah, there's that, and it leads to some pretty cool stuff. The fight scenes are really cool once everyone comes together. You know, you get Appa versus Nyla, you get really, really good Aang versus Zuko fight, which is another one of the reasons I actually would rate this episode rate this episode as being kind of like average to good rather than being like average to bad, and why I don't put it in like my bottom 5 episodes, because I think the strength of this fight and what they do with it, with the choreography of like the fight over the well and getting Katara's necklace back, and then especially just the finishing move of the fight of Aang doing the flip, getting the necklace, falling into the well, and you think Zuko has him, contained area, firebending straight down, and Aang just immediately water straight up, gets Zuko, and then Katara, you know, being very helpful with basically going with Sokka's idea of the perfume against Nyla to distract her, and that's kind of the, you know, end result of that kind of fight scene. It's really nicely done, and of course the fact that they do bring June back later on because of the importance and the special power that the two of them have together, it is kind of I think overall nicely done. Of course they bring Bato back, which makes this episode feel a little bit more important than, say, you know, The Great Divide, where they don't bring those characters back. I think the only criticism I'd have of, you know, in any way, just like what they've done with Bato since, is just, why wasn't Bato in North and South, the comic series? Like, I think everyone was asking for him, just even as like a little reference, just show up in a panel, reference him. Why is he not here? Something along those lines. He would have been a really cool addition to that book, and like almost to the point where, like, could you have almost replaced Gilak with Bato and had it be more meaningful that like someone has a difference in opinion to Hakoda, and have it be this more personal thing where like suddenly a character we know, who's actually this very nice character, has actually a difference in opinion of the way to do things, that Bato really likes the way the South is and doesn't like the way the North is. That would have been almost a better way to do it. I'm not like super into that idea necessarily, but I think it was a way to maybe like, if you didn't want to just use Bato as a reference, you could have used him in a more important role. But as I said, even just any inclusion of him, like, why wasn't he there? Why wasn't he there as like Hakoda's right-hand man? Or maybe do the bigger thing of go down the road of making him the bad guy in that book. But they didn't use him at all in any way. In that, like, it's just stuff like does he have a family? Does he have kids? Or like, are they establishing that he's kind of a little bit younger than Hakoda? Maybe he doesn't have a family yet. Maybe he starts one now that there are, you know, Northerners and more people and so on. Just little things like that. It's like, why didn't they do anything with the character? Did they forget about him, or what? What else do we have to talk about here? Yeah, just, you know, we do actually, I suppose, properly get to meet Hakoda here through the flashback, which is quite well done. And, you know, as I said, the kind of younger Sokka scene of how desperate he was to go, but him having to stay behind, and, you know, ultimately it being something that he really commits himself to, protecting his sister, the mission that his father gave him. And over the course of this journey with Aang, he is becoming the warrior that I suppose Hakoda realizes he has the potential to be. And already the growth, as I said, from episode 1 to this episode with the ice dodging and aspects of his leadership shining through really, really do highlight that. But yeah, I think that's it. So in conclusion, good aspects to this episode. Introduction of June, Nyla, a lot of the fight stuff at the end was actually really well done. I liked the overall like Sokka focus of this episode. But the weakness for sure is just the placement, given very similar thing with Aang happens in the next episode, and then just kind of some very heavy-handed writing, just in terms of like, are you really trying to get us to believe that like the group is breaking up for good now just because of this issue? A little bit of that. Like, as I said, better placement could have helped the episode, and then not being so blunt, I think, with a lot of the way you're approaching this character arc would have been better as well. But yeah, solid enough episode. But as I said in the last one, 14, 15, 16, 17, a fine string of episodes, but not an amazing run of episodes. Another part of the reason for why I think most people would rate book 1 as the weakest book of Avatar, in that right now we very much are, please can we get to the Northern Water Tribe, can something important happen? Thankfully 16 is a relatively important episode, some big reveals happen there. 17 has its importance, but we'll get to it in the review, of course. But definitely 18, 19, 20 are where the big things happen. So that's been my review for Bato of the Water Tribe. In the comments, let me know what your thoughts are on this episode. Do you rate it as one of the lower episodes or not? What are your thoughts? Let me know in the comments below. But yeah, that's been the video for today. Thanks for watching, and bye.